Let's take a look at the APL authoring tool, or the Alexa Presentation Language Authoring tool, which allows us to incorporate Alexa presentation language functionality into our Alexa skills. So here I'm at the Alexa Developer Console, and we're actually going to create a new skill which we'll be building, which is called Capital Trivia. So the skill really will entail asking questions about the capitals of various countries, and let's start the process of creating it now, and we'll show how the APL authoring tool can be used. So go ahead and click on the Create Skill button, and let's give our skill a name, and we can name it Capital-Trivia, and the default language is English US. And I'll just like to give you a reminder that if you intend to test this skill out, or any Alexa skill that you're building on an actual Alexa device, in order for that to work, the language that you choose here must match the language that is enabled or set up for your Alexa device. So if you click on here, as you'll notice, there are different versions of English for Australia, Canada, India, the UK, and so on. So you have to ensure that the language you select here matches the language that's set up on your Alexa device. If you leave it as English US, it will still work in the Alexa Developer Console, but it will not work on your device if your language is not English US. Okay, so once that's set, let's scroll down. We will be building a custom skill, and if we scroll down, we want to choose a method to host our skill's backend resources. Let us select Alexa hosted Node.js. So click on that. And what that does is it provides an environment within the Alexa Developer Console for us to work on the Lambda function for our skill. So we don't have to go out to AWS. It's going to be hosted internally in the skill. So select that option and scroll back up to the top, and let's click on Create Skill. Here we get a CAPTCHA, so let's go ahead and enter the characters we see. Click on Continue, and this initializes the skill for us. Okay, so now we are at the Developer Console. Our skill has been created, and if you look at the left-hand navigation and you scroll down, you should see a display link. And this is what you need to click on to get to the APL authoring tool. So go ahead and click on Display. This should launch the APL authoring tool. I'll just close off these notices that appeared here. And the first thing you'll be greeted with is to choose how you'd like to create visuals for your skill. And there are some templates that are already available to start off from. And what I would advise is, if you're new to APL, it would be a great way to get an introduction and to see examples of how APL is used. You can start with the templates. And as you get more experience and you learn about the various components and layouts and resources and so on, you could start from scratch. So let's go ahead and let's open up a sample, this short text sample, and that would launch the APL authoring tool. So as you'll see, in the middle of the screen here is what the layout will look like on a device. And below here, there are different sizes of devices to choose from. So you have the small hub, you can select it, and you can get an idea of how it will appear on a small hub. Here is the small hub landscape. Then we have a medium hub, large hub, and extra large TV. And if by any chance you're designing for a custom device, you can create your own dimensions. So that is a little bit about the different types of views you can see. On the right-hand side, here's where you can drag and drop elements onto the display. So here you have containers, frames, images, and these are different items that you can use to build an APL layout. So there are pages, and you can even include video and touch wrappers and so on. So that is a little bit about the components that you're able to use. On the left-hand side, you'll see some different options. So if we click on GUI, this gives a visual layout of how our skill appears. And as you can see there, it starts with a main template. And as you click through, there is a parent container. Here you get actually a visual overview of what the settings are for those various items, and you can use this to configure the various items. So next up, we have APL, and this is the raw JSON itself. I'm just going to scroll this across. This is the actual file that makes up your APL configuration. So you can actually work on this, get the display to look how you want it to, and then you can download this configuration, this JSON file, and this is what you'll use to pull into your custom code. So here's the APL, and this is all the code here that makes up the configuration of the layout. Next up is data, and accompanying each APL file is an equivalent data resource. And you can think of it as once the APL layout is loaded up, there is configuration that dictates how it displays, and then there's also data that drives what appears, the text and so on, the source of images that's associated with the display. So it's sort of a two-part process in that there is a visual aspect of the layout, and then it has a data aspect that is also included with the configuration. So next we have styles, and styles, you could think of styles as equivalent of CSS in the web programming world. These display the look and feel and colors and so on, and fonts and sizes of the elements that are on your layout. The next icon here is document. This just gives a high-level view of the entire document without the additional details of styles and data and so on. Next up are resources. And in APL, resources really are, you could think of them as variables that can be reused. So as an example, at the top here, a color of color text primary is defined, and you could think of that as a color text primary variable. And this can be reused everywhere in your layouts. It can also be reused in your styles and so on. So think of resources as layouts. Then we have graphics. We also have settings and commands. So commands really are if you incorporate touch elements or buttons on your layout. You can configure when users touch on buttons, you can configure commands that are associated with those elements to be executed. So that's a high-level overview of the APL authoring tool and some of the elements that are associated with the actual JSON configuration of the APL document. And as I mentioned, when you're done doing your configuration, typically what you'll do is you'll click on this download code, and that saves the file as a JSON file. And let's open that up. And here it is. So this is what it looks like. It has a document parent tag at the top. Down below, as we see, there are resources. So we mentioned resources being the variables that you set up to be reused in your configuration. Then scrolling down, we have a styles section. And again, styles would be the equivalent of CSS to give colors and text sizes and so on. If you continue scrolling down, after the styles, here is where our main template is. And what you'll see is there is a parameters key here that has a value of payload. And in the main template, payload actually maps to the main data sources element, and we'll see that a little below. So within your main template, here's all the items that make up the layout and basically the container. Here's the overarching container, and then there's an image and so on. So this is where you define how your layout looks. And here's the data sources element that I mentioned. So the payload that's referenced above here maps to the data sources element. So within data sources, here's where you'll pick the actual data that drives what you see on the display, such as the URL for a background image, or here you also have any text that appears on the layout and so on. You configure that in the data sources, and then you refer to that data within your layout as payload dot, and then you can refer to the actual elements that form part of this data sources. So that's a high-level overview of the JSON file for an APL layout, and we will actually be building this out and doing some edits on an APL document in another video.